Hartwell pressed his back against the cold stone wall, every nerve sharpened to silence. From the shadows of the servants' stairwell, he could just glimpse John Fisher as the man descended into the hidden pit. The trapdoor yawned open like the mouth of a grave, swallowing him whole. The sounds that followed were not those of ordinary work. A heavy body dragged, a muffled thump, a groan weak and fading. Then, silence. When John re-emerged, his face bore no trace of effort, no shadow of guilt, only the stillness of a man who had performed the act so often it required no thought. Hartwell's stomach turned, but he did not flinch. He could not. If John sensed another presence, it would be over before Hartwell could draw breath. John replaced the crates over the trapdoor, wiped his hands on his trousers, and ascended the main staircase without once looking back. The cellar swallowed the sound of his steps until the house seemed to exhale again. Hartwell moved then, quick and purposeful. He studied the ground near the trapdoor, noting fresh stains in the dirt. A metallic tang stung the back of his throat. He forced himself not to lift the door again, not now, not when discovery was certain, but every detail etched itself into his memory with painful clarity. He climbed back to the main hall, pausing at the threshold to listen. Laughter. Voices. The men were awake again, their conversation drifting lazily from the parlor. Yet still, fewer voices than before. Another guest had vanished, and none seemed to notice. Hartwell slipped into his room, bolted the door, and sat at the small writing desk by the window. His hands trembled as he reached for his journal. He forced them steady, the pages filled with notes, sketches, observations, the oleander, the poisoned tea, the trapdoor, the missing men, evidence, enough perhaps to persuade a magistrate, if he survived long enough, to deliver it. But survival was no longer a matter of strength or speed, it was a matter of deception. To remain in the inn was to remain inside Lavinia's theatre. If he revealed too much suspicion, she would strike. If he played his role too well, he might drink poison without knowing. He closed the journal and slipped it beneath the lining of his travel case. Then he straightened, forcing calm into his breath. He would play the guest a little longer. He would smile at Lavinia, endure her questions, even pretend to sip her tea. And while she performed her ritual of charm and poison, he would prepare his countermove. As the evening shadows lengthened and the lamps were lit once more, Hartwell stood at the mirror, adjusting his collar. He studied his reflection, searching for cracks. He could not afford a single one. For the first time, he admitted the truth to himself. He was not merely investigating Lavinia Fisher. He was at war with her, a war of patience, of masks, of subtle strikes in the dark. And in that war, the first mistake would be fatal. By the time the bell rang for supper, Hartwell had fastened his mask in place. The parlor glowed with lamplight, the table once more laden with meats, bread, and steaming bowls that filled the air with a savory haze. Yet fewer chairs were occupied. 3 men now remained besides Hartwell, their faces slack, their laughter slower, as if every hour in the house drained them further. And at the head, radiant as ever, sat Lavinia Fisher. She greeted him with a smile too direct, too knowing. "Mr. Hartwell," she said, her voice smooth as glass, "you are difficult to please. One might almost believe you distrust my hospitality." The merchant chuckled weakly, but the others avoided his gaze. Hartwell inclined his head. "On the contrary, madam, I have rarely encountered such care for one's guests." Her eyes narrowed, not in anger, but in interest. The game was underway. Plates were passed, wine poured. Lavinia's conversation flowed with practiced ease, weaving questions and stories together so that no one noticed how much they revealed. She asked the merchant about his accounts, the surveyor about his map work, the broker about his profits. Each answered eagerly, unguarded, their secrets spilling like coins into her waiting hands. Then her gaze turned back to Hartwell. "And you, sir?" she asked, her tone deceptively casual. "What is it that occupies you in life? Surely a man so careful in his habits must have a profession that rewards caution." The table fell silent. Even John Fisher, seated farther down with his broad shoulders hunched, glanced up at the question. Hartwell smiled faintly, breaking a piece of bread between his fingers. "I keep ledgers," he said, "for merchants who prefer honesty in their sums." It was a lie. Simple, colorless, unremarkable. A perfect lie, he hoped. But Lavinia tilted her head, studying him as though the words themselves gave off a scene she could detect. Her lips curved. "Ledgers," she repeated softly. "Yes, you do seem a man who keeps accounts, tallying gains and losses, measuring what others overlook." The words carried weight, aimed not at the room, but at him alone. The tea was brought out then, steaming in delicate porcelain. Again, Lavinia herself poured his cup. Again, she lingered, her hand brushing the rim as she placed it before him. "Perhaps tonight," she said with a smile, "it would please me greatly." Hartwell felt the room watching. The men, dulled by poison, drank without hesitation. John Fisher drained his glass of wine. Only Hartwell sat unmoving, the tea's fragrance curling upward like invisible fingers. He lifted the cup at last, turned it slightly in his hand, and touched it to his lips. He let the steam fog his breath, let the room believe he drank. Then he set it down again, half full. Lavinia's gaze did not leave him. She said nothing, but the smile on her lips deepened, sharpened, as though she had caught the faintest whisper of his deception. Dinner ended in uneasy laughter. The guests retired, one by one, until only Hartwell remained by the fire. Lavinia lingered at the doorway, her figure framed by flickering light. "Good night, Mr. Hartwell," she said softly. "Sleep well." Her tone was silk, but her eyes were steel. Hartwell bowed his head, hiding the tension in his jaw. The war had shifted. She no longer treated him as prey. She treated him as rival. The house grew silent after supper, its corridors dimly lit by oil lamps, the air heavy with heat and the sickly sweetness of roses. Hartwell did not retreat to his bed. Instead, he waited, listening. The faint snores of the drugged guests drifted through the walls, punctuated now and then by a cough or a restless murmur. At last, footsteps. Not the stagger of drunken merchants, nor the shuffle of servants, but measured, purposeful steps. Two voices. Hartwell moved silently into the hallway, pressing himself into the shadows of a narrow alcove near the stairwell. The voices grew clearer as they descended from the dining hall into the parlor. John Fisher's growl was unmistakable. "He's different, too sharp. He watches everything. We should deal with him tonight." And then Lavinia's voice, low, controlled, and far more dangerous. "No, not yet. He's careful, yes, but not invulnerable. A man who refuses tea refuses comfort. Comfort is how men betray themselves. He'll slip, and when he does, I want to be there to see it." John spat. "What if he doesn't? What if he's not like the others?" Lavinia's footsteps paused. Hartwell pictured her standing still, eyes alight in thought. "Then," she said slowly, "we make him like the others. No one comes to 6 Mile House without leaving something behind. If not his purse, then his breath." Silence. Then John's voice again, grudgingly. "Very well, but I'll keep the spade ready." Their steps resumed, moving past Hartwell's hiding place. He held his breath as they passed, their shadows stretching long across the wall. Lavinia's perfume, sweet jasmine with that faint bitterness, lingered in the air as they went by. When the sound of their steps faded, Hartwell exhaled slowly. The mask was slipping, not just hers, but his. She knew. She was waiting for him to stumble. He returned to his chamber, every sense on fire. The journal lay where he had hidden it, but it no longer felt sufficient. Notes and sketches would not save him. He needed allies, witnesses, proof undeniable. Hartwell went to the window. Outside, the moon hung low over the Charleston Road, its light silvering the swaying marsh grass. Somewhere beyond the horizon lay the city, and with it, law, order, a chance to expose her. But between him and Charleston stood 6 miles of dark road, and Lavinia Fisher. He let the curtain fall. Time was narrowing. If he stayed another night, he might not leave at all. And so Samuel Hartwell began to plan his escape. The clock in the parlor struck midnight, its chime muffled through the floorboards. Hartwell stood in his chamber, bag in hand, every sense attuned to the silence. The inn seemed asleep. No footsteps, no laughter, no voices drifting through the halls, only the restless groans of the drugged men in their beds. He had mapped his route in his mind. down the servants' stairwell, through the rear passage by the kitchens, and out into the yard where his horse waited tethered. 6 miles of road lay between him and Charleston, and with every mile the weight of Lavinia's shadow might lessen. Hartwell slipped into the hall. The floorboards creaked faintly underfoot, though he moved with the caution of a hunter. He descended the servants' stairs, his hand brushing the damp wall for balance. The air smelled of smoke and soil, of something buried. The kitchen lay dark, its hearth cold. He crossed it quickly, easing the latch of the back door. The night air rushed in, cool and damp, carrying the scent of marsh and river. Freedom was only a few steps away. He moved into the yard, gravel crunching faintly beneath his boots. His horse shifted in the shadows, ears flicking at his approach. Relief surged through him, until the silence broke. "Leaving us so soon, Mr. Hartwell?" The voice floated from the porch, smooth as silk, sharp as steel. Lavinia Fisher stepped into the lantern glow, her white dress shimmering like bone in the night. Behind her John loomed, arms folded, shovel in hand. Hartwell's blood ran cold, but he forced himself to stand straight. "The road is long, madam. I thought it best to make an early start." Her smile was soft, almost tender. "How curious. Guests usually prefer to stay, to rest, to drink." She tilted her head. "But you never drink, do you?" The trap in her voice was clear. Hartwell said nothing. Lavinia descended the porch steps slowly, her bay, eyes never leaving his. "Charleston is 6 miles away, and the night is treacherous. Men vanish on that road, terrible things happen." She stopped a few paces away, her perfume heavy in the cool air. "I should hate to see you come to harm." John shifted the shovel across his shoulder, silent but menacing. Hartwell's hand brushed the inside of his coat where his pistol lay hidden. He knew he could not outfight them both in the yard. Not here, not now. His only weapon was time. He bowed slightly, forcing calm into his voice. "Your concern is noted, madam, but I am accustomed to danger. I shall take my chances on the road." Her eyes flashed, a glimmer of something between admiration and malice. She stepped aside, gesturing toward the gate. "Then take them. But know this, few who walk away from 6 Mile House ever reach Charleston." Hartwell mounted his horse, the animal restless beneath him. He spared one last glance at the inn, its windows glowing faintly against the night. Lavinia stood in the yard, her face serene, her figure framed by the lantern's glow. As he rode into the darkness, her voice followed him, soft as a prayer, sharp as a curse. "We shall see each other again, Mr. Hartwell, one way or another." The road stretched before him, silent and endless, but in his bones he knew he had not escaped. He had only begun the second act of her play. The night swallowed Hartwell as he urged his horse into a brisk trot. The Charleston Road cut through marshland and pine, a pale ribbon beneath the moonlight. The air was heavy, thick with the cries of unseen insects, the croak of frogs echoing from the ditches. For the first mile, he allowed himself hope. Each hoofbeat carried him farther from 6 Mile House, farther from Lavinia's gaze. He breathed deep of the salt-tinged night, telling himself the worst was behind him. But the feeling did not last. The road was too quiet. Even the frogs fell silent. Then, faint but certain, he heard it. Hooves following, slow, deliberate, keeping distance. Hartwell's pulse quickened. He glanced back. The road stretched empty in the moonlight, yet he knew the sound was real. He spurred his horse faster, gravel flying beneath its hooves. The pursuing steps quickened too. He rode harder, the wind biting at his face. The marshland blurred past, dark pools of water catching the moon. Yet no matter how he pressed his mount, the echo followed, neither gaining nor falling behind, but pacing him like a predator stalking its prey. Then, from the tree line, a shadow moved. A rider, cloaked and faceless in the dim light, appeared for a heartbeat before vanishing again into the pines. Another rider surfaced on the opposite side, silent, ghost-like. Hartwell's breath caught. He was not escaping. He was being herded. The road ahead curved sharply where the forest thickened. If he followed it, he would ride straight into their snare. He pulled the reins hard, veering off into the marsh grass, water splashing under his horse's hooves. Branches whipped at his face. The land grew uneven, treacherous, but still he pressed on, heart hammering, eyes fixed on the faint glow of Charleston that shimmered distantly on the horizon like salvation. Behind him, the riders gave chase. He heard them now. Whoa! Whistles, sharp and shrill, cutting through the night. Signals, coordination. They were more than two. The marsh sucked at his horse's legs. He dared not slow, though each step threatened to pitch him into the mire. His hand gripped the pistol in his coat. If they overtook him, he would not be buried alive in Lavinia's cellar. He would make them bleed first. And then a sound ahead, distant wheels on the road, the creak of a wagon, the flicker of lantern light through the trees. Civilization, witnesses, perhaps salvation. Hartwell's chest tightened with desperate hope as he steered toward it, praying he was not galloping straight into another of Lavinia's traps. The lantern swung on the wagon's side, its glow trembling across the rutted road. Hartwell burst from the marsh grass, horse lathered and wild, his coat torn by branches. The wagon jolted to a halt, the driver pulling hard on the reins. "Easy there," a man's voice called, sharp with alarm. Hartwell drew his horse alongside, breath ragged. Two figures sat atop the wagon, an older man with a weathered face, and beside him a younger, broad-shouldered lad. A family, perhaps, farmers returning late from Charleston. "Sir," Hartwell gasped, "for God's sake, help me. Riders, behind me." The driver squinted past him into the darkness. "Riders, this hour." As if in answer, the sound came, hooves thundering through the trees, whistles cutting sharp through the night. The farmer's face blanched. The younger man reached for the musket strapped to the wagon's side. "Father," but Hartwell gripped his arm, voice urgent. "Not here. They'll surround us. Drive hard toward Charleston." The old man hesitated only a moment before cracking the reins. The wagon lurched forward, wheels rattling against the road. Hartwell spurred his horse alongside, keeping pace. The riders emerged then, shadowy figures slipping from the tree line like wolves. At least three of them, their faces masked by scarves, their mounts sleek and dark. They did not shout, they did not threaten. They only closed in, silent and merciless. The younger man fired the musket. The shot cracked the night, smoke billowing. One rider's horse reared, screaming, but the others pressed on unfazed. Hartwell wheeled his horse, pistol raised. He fired once, twice. Sparks flared, the smell of powder filling the air. A shadow toppled into the ditch, swallowed by reeds. For a heartbeat, the others slowed. Then, from the rear of the pursuit, a voice rose above the pounding hooves, smooth, cold, familiar. "Drive him back. H. Ye's mine." Lavinia. Hartwell's blood chilled. She had not waited at the inn. She had followed. The riders fanned out, one darting ahead to cut the wagon off. The old man cursed, straining at the reins. The horse screamed as the shadow rider swerved into its path, steel glinting in his hand. Hartwell urged his own mount forward, drawing the riders' attention. Their blades met in a clash of sparks, steel against steel. Pain lanced through Hartwell's arm, but he held his ground. The wagon thundered past, racing toward Charleston, lantern bobbing wildly. But Hartwell knew he could not simply ride with them. Lavinia's pursuit was not for plunder, nor fear, nor silence of witnesses. It was for him, and she would follow until one of them lay dead. The wagon's wheels shrieked as it barreled down the road, carrying its terrified passengers toward Charleston. Hartwell lagged behind, wheeling his horse in the churned mud. The masked riders had fallen back into the shadows, giving space, circling like hounds called off by their mistress. And then she came. Lavinia Fisher rode into the moonlight astride a pale mare, her white dress flowing behind her like a banner of war. She carried no mask, no musket, no disguise. Her weapon was herself, her poise, her certainty, her eyes gleaming like cold fire. "Mr. Hartwell," she called, her voice carrying effortlessly over the distance. "How tiresome you are. Do you know how many men have tried to leave my house by night?" Hartwell raised his pistol, though his hand trembled from blood loss and exhaustion. "And how many have succeeded?" Her smile was a blade. "None, until tonight." With a sharp cry, she spurred her mare forward. The distance between them vanished in heartbeats. Steel flashed in her hand. He had not seen her draw it, but now she held a dagger, the moonlight silvering its edge. Their horses collided in a frenzy of hooves and breath. Hartwell fired, once, twice, but she was already upon him, the dagger slicing past his cheek, drawing blood. He struck back with the pistol's butt, grazing her shoulder. For an instant their faces were inches apart, breath mingling, eyes locked. She laughed, an exultant, terrible sound. "Yes," she whispered, "fight me." They wheeled and clashed again, steel ringing in the night. Hartwell drew his saber at last, parrying her blows as sparks flew. Her movements were swift, almost inhuman, every strike aimed not to kill but to drive him where she wanted, closer to the ditch, toward the mire. He stumbled once, his horse sliding in the mud, and she pressed in like a hawk stooping on prey. The dagger pierced his coat, grazing his ribs. Pain flared hot. He struck back desperately, his saber catching her sleeve, tearing the fabric. Her smile only widened. "Better," she hissed. The road was theirs alone now, a stage lit by moonlight, every clash of steel echoing like thunder. Around them, the marsh watched in silence, as though the night itself held its breath. Hartwell knew. This was not a duel of survival. This was theatre to her. Every strike, every feint, a performance. And she would not rest until she wrote the final line. And for the first time, Samuel Hartwell understood. He was not merely her rival, he was her chosen audience. Hartwell's lungs burned, every breath sharp with blood and night air. His arm ached from the constant clash of steel, his ribs seared where her blade had grazed him. Still, he held the saber high, refusing to yield ground. Lavinia was tireless. She pressed him with a dancer's grace, her pale mare circling his mount in a deadly spiral. Every strike was precise, every parry purposeful. She was not trying to kill him outright. She was toying with him, savoring the unraveling of his strength. "You are not like the others," she said, her dagger flashing as it skimmed his throat, close enough to draw a bead of crimson. They wept, they begged, but you fight. Hartwell spat blood into the mud. "And I'll die on my feet before I kneel to you." Her laughter rang, clear and cruel. "Good. Die beautifully then." She lunged again. He barely deflected the blow, the impact jarring through his arm. His horse screamed, stumbling toward the ditch. In the chaos, his pistol slipped from its holster, clattering into the reeds below. For a heartbeat, despair clawed at him. He was unhorsed, bleeding, his strength waning. Lavinia circled, dagger raised for the final strike. And then, his eyes caught it, a glint in the marsh, a lantern bobbing faintly in the distance, the farmer's wagon, still near enough, still moving along the road. Witnesses. If he could reach them, if he could survive one last strike, he might drag her from shadow into daylight. "Come then," he shouted, forcing the last of his voice into a roar. "End it!" Her eyes gleamed with delight as she charged, dagger flashing down in a silver arc. At the last instant, Hartwell wrenched his horse sideways, driving his saber upward in a desperate thrust. The steel met flesh. Lavinia gasped, not in pain, but in something closer to ecstasy. Her dagger faltered, slicing shallow across his chest instead of his heart. She slid from the saddle, white skirts billowing as she fell into the mud, crimson blooming across her side. The night went still. Hartwell swayed in his saddle, blood pouring from his own wound, vision swimming. He forced his horse forward, spurring it toward the faint lantern glow of the wagon. Behind him, Lavinia lay in the road, propped on one elbow, bloodied but smiling. "Run, Samuel," she whispered into the dark, her voice carrying impossibly far. "Run to Charleston. Tell them your tale. It will not save you. My name will live longer than yours." Her laughter, ragged but triumphant, followed him into the marsh night. By dawn, Samuel Hartwell reached Charleston. His horse was staggering beneath him, its flanks lathered, his own body slumped and bleeding. The city gates loomed like salvation, and for the first time in hours he allowed himself to believe he might live. Guards rushed forward at the sight of his wounds. They pulled him down from the saddle, voices rising in alarm. "Fetch a surgeon, quickly!" Hartwell's hands, trembling and blood-stained, gripped one man's coat. 6 Mile House, he rasped. The Fishers, they kill them, every traveler. The inn is a grave. Word spread like fire through dry brush. By noon, Hartwell was seated in a magistrate's chamber, bandaged but pale, his every breath still sharp with pain. He repeated his testimony. The trap, the cellar, the riders, Lavinia herself leading the pursuit. The magistrates exchanged uneasy glances. Some scoffed, calling it the fevered tale of a half-dead traveler. Others paled, whispering of rumors long denied. One man finally stood. Enough doubt, enough delay. If half of this is true, then Charleston's lifeblood, the road itself, is threatened. Raise men. We ride at dusk. Relief washed through Hartwell, but it was hollow. He knew what they would find. An inn wiped clean, the cellars emptied, the ground smoothed of fresh earth. Lavinia was too clever to leave her mask behind. And he was right. That night, soldiers stormed 6 Mile House. They found John Fisher at the door, sneering defiance, but no blood, no bodies, no proof of the horrors Hartwell had seen. Lavinia stood in the parlor, serene and luminous, greeting them as though they were honored guests. "Accusations?" she asked sweetly, her hands folded like a saint's. "From a fevered man who stumbled from the marsh? Why, gentlemen, you wound my hospitality." The soldiers searched. They found nothing, not the pit, not the bones, not even the torn fabric Hartwell had seen with his own eyes. Every trace had been swallowed by the earth or spirited away. Yet the seeds were sown. Whispers spread through Charleston taverns, in marketplaces along the docks. Merchants refused to stop at 6 Mile House. Travelers gave it a wide berth. The Fisher's name, once a lure of comfort, became a warning whispered after dark. Hartwell survived his wounds, but he knew the truth with bitter clarity. His word alone could not bring Lavinia down. She was no mere murderess. She was a legend in the making, her power rooted not only in fear, but in the very stories told about her. And though he had escaped with his life, he felt her shadow still, waiting beyond every road, every corner of the night. For legends do not die with steel. They live in the telling, and Lavinia Fisher would be told for centuries. Years later, Samuel Hartwell sat by the window of a Charleston inn, older now, his once dark hair gone silver, his body marked with scars that flared when the weather turned. The city outside bustled with carriages and merchants, its streets safer than in those shadowed years. On the table before him lay a folded broadsheet. The headline screamed in bold ink: Lavinia Fisher, executed. The witch of the 6 Mile House hanged. Hartwell had read the words a dozen times, yet still his eyes lingered. The details were there, the trial, the accusations, the gallows, how she had gone to the scaffold in her wedding gown, unrepentant, her final words daring heaven to take her soul. Charleston rejoiced. Parents spoke the name to frighten their children into obedience. Ballads already sprang up in the taverns, half fact and half invention. The woman he had fought on that moonlit road had become something else, larger, darker, untouchable. Hartwell closed his eyes, and still he could hear her laughter, feel the press of her blade, see the smile that had not faltered even when blood spread across her dress. Justice had come, and yet... He touched his ribs, where her dagger had once grazed him. "You won, didn't you?" he whispered into the empty room. "You'll be remembered long after I'm gone." A gust of wind rattled the shutters, and for a heartbeat he thought he heard it again, that laugh, lilting and terrible, threading through the city noise. Hartwell poured himself a drink, his hand unsteady. He raised it not in triumph, but in weary acknowledgement. Some spirits, he knew, were not laid to rest by rope or grave. Some haunted the living through story, through fear, through fascination. And Lavinia Fisher, murderess, mistress of 6 Mile House, the white phantom of Charleston Road, would haunt forever.